Balkans. The problem was that Germany had no land border with Greece, it being blocked by Yugoslavia and Bulgaria. Hitler demanded cooperation from both nations to allow his forces to pass through. Bulgaria agreed, and so too did Yugoslavia, both of whom joined the Axis forces. But public opinion in the latter was strongly anti-German, leading to a coup against the government and the rejection of any alliance. Outraged, Hitler ordered that when his troops invade Greece from Bulgaria on April 6, 1941, they were to concurrently invade Yugoslavia. Despite stiff resistance, Yugoslavia was overrun in just over a week and a half. 2 weeks later, the Greeks surrendered, having been overwhelmed by the combined might of the Germans and Italians. British assistance could do little to repel the invaders, and along with Greek forces, they retreated to the island of Crete. Consolidating his position on the Greek mainland, Hitler ordered the invasion of Crete to begin on May 20th, and it was opened with a massive attack by German paratroopers. After nearly 2 weeks of fierce fighting, the island fell, but while the British and observers in Washington were impressed with the effectiveness of a paratroop invasion launched against them, Hitler was appalled at the cost to his forces, and never again ordered a large-scale airborne invasion. Nazi Germany's army seemed unstoppable by mid-1941, and no one became more convinced of this than Hitler himself, who, after defeating the British on mainland Europe in France and Greece, and with Rommel continuing to push them back in North Africa, decided it was time to achieve his ultimate goal, the destruction of the Soviet Union. Hitler viewed the Soviet Union as a way of not only eradicating communism, but of feeding his 1,000-year Reich by providing vast areas of agricultural land and vital resources such as oil and metals. Germany's generals warned the Führer against invading the Soviet Union, however, unless Moscow attacked first. Britain herself remained unconquered, and worse still, was now sending fleets of her bombers into Europe to attack German industry. Also, the job of defeating British and British Commonwealth forces in Africa required the resources Hitler wanted to commit to fighting the Soviet Union. They believed it was better to send those forces to destroy British resistance in Africa and then seize British possessions in the Middle East, which would afford them oil, which would starve Britain of her supplies, and eventually help force London to surrender. Hitler was impatient, however. He argued that the German people would not be as supportive for a war on Russia after a few more years of fighting. He also believed the Soviet army was incompetent after its poor showing against Finland in the Winter War of 1939. If he waited, then the Soviet leadership might learn from their mistakes and become a more credible threat. Hitler would say, "We have only to kick in the front door, and the whole rotten Russian edifice will come tumbling down." He defied his generals and gave the order to attack the Soviet Union. Dubbed Operation Barbarossa, Germany committed a huge force of troops that included Romanian, Finnish, and Hungarian units, who were by now signed-up members of the Axis forces. The attack was launched from occupied Polish territory at 300 hours on Sunday, June 22, 1941, and involved a staggering 3.8 million personnel launched across a 2,900-kilometer front. The German forces were arranged in 3 key army groups: North, Center, and South. The Soviet army had warnings that the Germans were amassing for an invasion, but Stalin refused to believe it.